Everyone had a happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to this February 15th meeting of the SBCAG. Would you call the roll, Ms. Contreras?
Directors Williams?
Here.
Wolf? Here. Adam?
Here.
Lavanino?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Lizaldi?
Here.
Mosby?
Here.
Bennett?
Here.
Clark?
Here.
Murillo?
Here.
Patino?
Here.
Sierra? Here. And Chair Hartman.
Here. Please stand for the pledge. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now is time for public comment for matters not on today's agenda. And Mr. Ludwig?
Chair Hartman and directors, thank you very much. Bob Ludwig, I'm the president of the Coast Village Association, and I'm here with a very brief message of gratitude, a plea followed by gratitude. First of all, I looked at your agenda, had a chance to review it. I've followed SBCAG for a number of years as a hobbyist, and I'm overwhelmed by the scale of what you undertake. Your agendas are meaty and meaningful, and your work is imperative for the functioning of our county and our region. So I am grateful for that. The plea is that life has changed. There's just no other way to say it. It's changed out in my end of the Santa Barbara community. And I think, in fact, it changed for all of us no matter where you are in our community. I know that Mid-County, North County, extra counties, we've all been impacted by the recent devastation that has come upon us. And importantly, we've seen how vital transportation is to it's the lifeblood. It really is the lifeblood of all of our communities, not just Montecito, not just Coast Village. But I am here with a plea on behalf of the Coast Village community. And whether we are the epicenter or not, that's arguable. We currently are experiencing an ongoing devastation in the way that traffic no longer functions. With the loss of Highway 192, which is hopefully can be remedied soon, but we are going to consider that indefinite. And the impact of losing what we are told is 12,000 vehicles per day using that highway has put additional pressure on 101. You know that better than I. And on our surface streets. And those surface streets are Cabrillo, coming into the roundabout at Hot Springs, Salinas Old Coast Highway, and eventually Coast Village Road as traffic attempts to jump around in inexorable congestion on southbound Highway 101. And our merchants and businesses and residents that are in that area are absolutely devastated in a new economic avalanche. We can no longer conduct business as usual. And so the plea is whatever can be done to enhance and shorten the time period for when the freeway improvements may occur. I would say that what we thought the world was like when your plan was put together is not what the world is today. And we would urge you, and we will come back, hopefully on an agenda item, we will come back soon and ask you more specifically for your help in bringing improvements to bear in the Santa Barbara end so that the major regional transportation undertaking, the widening of 101, and the off-ramp improvements and the parallel projects that you are sponsoring, that those would occur sooner and much sooner rather than later. Thank you. Again, the gratitude for your work is really not stated enough, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Anna Marie God? Oh, excuse me. Okay, thank you.
You should all have a handout in front of you.
Board members, by now you should be aware that the illegal acts of Murillo and Councilmember Friedman took in order for Murillo to remove Councilmember Domingos as a rightfully chosen SBCAG appointee and have herself appointed to SBCAG. If you haven't, I will reiterate, Murillo used a council resolution that had been rescinded in 2009. Murillo broke the city's laws. She actually helped author a 2015 change to our codes of conduct. Under Rosenberg's Rules of Order, a motion to reconsider may be made only by a member who voted in the majority of the original motion. Murillo and Friedman were both in the minority, and they should have been ruled out of order. Let me reiterate again what Rosenberg's Rules of Order are. To keep rulemaking from looking like a ball on a tennis court played between two opposing sides, these rules specify if a member who voted in the minority seeks to make a motion to reconsider, it must be ruled out of order. The purpose of this rule is finality. If a member of a minority could make a motion to reconsider, then the item could be brought back to the body again and again, which would defeat the purpose of finality. It is simple. It is a bedrock principle where all rules of order, from the small town PTA to the U.S. Senate, keeps the tennis ball in play only for so long. Someone from the winning side, the majority, can request reconsideration. The city of Santa Barbara has always observed this principle under both Robert's Rules of Order and Rosenberg's. The city attorney of Santa Barbara has already acknowledged that there were problems with the vote. These problems go beyond a simple mistake. I believe that this was a calculated effort to circumvent and break the city's law and install Murillo as the appointee to SBCAG. Legally, Murillo could not be installed. She did not have the votes. SBCAG now has an illegitimate member of the board. The city of Santa Barbara is now facing a lawsuit. The questions for you are you willing to condone Murillo's actions and seat her on the board despite the underhanded and illegal actions that she took to be appointed? If you seat her, are you willing to allow her to vote on motions, considering that is more than likely that the actions will be ruled invalid? Those of you who endorsed Murillo for mayor should be appalled by her naked attempt to break the law. Each of you should demand that Murillo step down. If she does not, work to unseat her.
Thank you. And with that, that's all the speaker slips I have. So with that, I close public comment. And using the chair's prerogative, I would like to go back to Executive Director Kern and ask about Measure A work on Highway 101 and how we're trying to work that faster than we had originally scheduled in response to some issues that were raised during public comment.
Madam Chair, members of the board, yes, we are submitting a grant tomorrow for $187 million. It's a cumulative amount of the various grant programs that are available to implement A, B, and C of phase 4, and that's starting from Carpinteria just north of Summerlin. And then D and E will be submitted in the next cycle, and 2020, thank you. I knew a voice inside my head would give me the answer. And so we are well on our way to implementing this project. The engineering and design is happening as we move forward to these phases of the project. So I'm very fortunate to have this opportunity under SB1 to fund this project and make it a reality.
Good. And Mr. Williams.
Well, if this board, though, is interested in dealing with the Carmageddon that's been resulted from the disaster and the closure, according to our public works folks, for at least a year, maybe 2 of 192, then it is possible that one of the parallel projects, if we decided to prioritize it, could be built before the 192 is opened. And I can tell you the Coast Village Roundabout in particular would be a godsend right now on businesses that are on death's door. It's our emergency personnel trying to move through that. It's our flood control trucks trying to move through that. It's our constituents, all over the county stuck in that. And the parallel projects are not a big ticket item compared with the 101 project as a whole, and could really, really, really help.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question that the speaker had originally mentioned 192 as being one of the major problems in this, and I was just wondering what the schedule was to do 192, because it's obviously going to be a quicker fix than the 101. And if there's any way to prioritize that project.
Madam Chair,
yeah.
I just wanted to remind the board we're not agendized to
Right.
discuss this today. We can ask brief questions and respond to public comment, but if the board's interested in discussing the schedule for 192 or the project, I'd recommend that we direct staff to bring it back on a future agenda.
Or I imagine it might be part of Caltrans' report later in the agenda, so maybe we could hold it to that. Okay, and Ms. Van Mullum on the, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Actually, I'm going to let you finish because maybe you were headed where I was going to ask a question.
Okay, Ms. Van Mullum, would you comment about the legitimacy of our actions as a board going forward, the legalities as you understand them?
Sure, Madam Chair, and members of the board. I did have an opportunity to look at this and look at the Joint Powers Agreement for SBCAG. And in response to the public comment, it is up to each city to determine how to appoint their representative. And I also spoke with Mr. Kalan, the Santa Barbara City Attorney, and he confirmed that the City Council did vote to remove Councilmember Dominguez and then to appoint Mayor Murillo to represent the city for SBCAG.
Thank you.
That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
So turning then to the consent calendar, does anyone have any item they would like to pull? I would like to pull 4B.
And Madam Chair, I need to recuse myself from 4E, so if that could be handled separately.
And Mr. Bennett.
Madam Chair, I need to abstain from item A under the consent calendar, as I was not in attendance.
Okay. Okay, so we'll vote separately on A. Let's do that first. And do we have any public speaker slips on the consent agenda?
No public speakerships.
Okay, so first thing is, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of January 18th? And a second? And could we have a roll call vote, Ms. Contreras?
Director Williams?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Adam? Aye. Levanino?
Abstain.
Richardson?
Aye.
Lizaldi?
Aye.
Bennett?
Abstain.
Clark?
Abstain.
Murillo?
Abstain, please.
Patino?
Aye.
Sierra? And Chair Hartman.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-6.
Terry.
Director Mosby.
Aye.
Let's see, turning then to item 4B, Mr. Williams, there's a light down there. Am I, Mr. Richardson? Okay. 4B. Yes?
I need to read it to the record.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. 4B, San Ynez Valley Traffic Circulation and Safety Study Grant Application. Recommended action. Authorize staff to submit an application for a Caltrans Transportation Planning Grant requesting $300,000 to procure consultant services to complete a San Ynez Valley Traffic Circulation and Safety Study.
Thank you. Mr. Becker.
Yes, Chair Hartman. Yesterday we discussed this item at the North County Sub-Regional. This is for a Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant to study traffic congestion and safety issues in the San Ynez Valley. Basically, the 154 from Armour Ranch Road to the 101 interchange, the 246 from the roundabout to the Buellton city limit, and the 101, primarily the interchanges between Santa Rosa Road and the Los Olivos exit. We expect this project to take about 2 years. We're going to look for improvements that improve the current and future congestion issues while also considering the livability of the area, connectivity, and so forth. We're seeking $300,000. We developed a partnership with the Chumash tribe for this project. In addition to the $300,000 we're seeking, we were proposing that both SBCAG and the Chumash tribe match with $25,000 each. There'll be a robust public process where we expect to have it professionally facilitated to find issues focusing on the current and solving current and future problems rather than relitigating anything in the past. And also, I think we're proposing to have a bus tour of the area once we identified some of the hotspots and potential solutions that would invite stakeholders on a bus tour to go around and discuss the potential solutions for each location. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Is there an active transportation grant that might coordinate with this?
In addition to this project, SBCAG, using some SB1 planning funds, we're proposing to prepare a San Ynez Valley Bicycle Master Plan in the upcoming year. That will be conducted by staff, and this project we would hire a consultant for.
Good. And Mr. Cohen, would you like to not leave?
By the way, maybe we could wish Mr. Cohen a happy birthday.
And thank you for spending it with us. And just before you speak, I want to say that I think this is just a tremendous opportunity to deal proactively and collectively with significant traffic congestion issues on the 154 and the 246 and the 101. And it's taken an extraordinary effort by the part of SBCAG staff and the executive director pushing this, and I really appreciate it. And also want to give a call out to Mr. Olenek, who spent some time with me from Caltrans describing this grant and encouraging us to go forward. And especially to the Chumash, who have, I think their participation makes this unusual and makes this a much more competitive grant, and we're appreciative, very appreciative for joining with us in a government-to-government project like this. Mr. Cohen.
Good morning, Sam Cohen, Government Affairs Legal Officer for San Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. There is absolutely no place I would rather be than with SBCAG on my birthday, for certain. It doesn't escape our notice that all your items on the consent agenda are Chumash issues, actually. The first one being a pass-through grant for climate change, and we thank you for facilitating that grant. And the second item on your consent agenda is our participation in a valley-wide planning grant, of which we are a what is the exact term? We're a sub-applicant, so we're pleased to be partnering with SBCAG on that grant as well. And the tribe is also providing a small contribution towards the matching funds. So we ask for your approval of today's grant today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Richardson.
I want to emphasize the safety and necessity of this study. It started with the accidental death of a high school student in Refugio Road on 246. A task force was formed to discuss what to do about the dangers of Refugio Road in front of the high school, and that has extracted itself to this study. And I want to thank SBCAG and the folks and the staff for going ahead and making this effort to come true. And especially I want to thank the tribe for their contribution. So thank you.
Okay, I don't think we need a separate vote on this item. It can be part of the balance of the agenda when we move forward. So that brings us to E. Would you read that into the record, Ms. Contreras?
Certainly. 4E, Carpinteria Creek Shuttle Easy Lift Contract and Budget Amendments. 4E1, approve and authorize the chair to execute amendment number 2 with Easy Lift to increase and not to exceed the amount from $200,000 to $250,000 to provide Carpinteria Creek shuttle service until the temporary bike path connection is open for use in March 2018. 4E2, adopt resolution 1809 amending the fiscal year 2017-18 overall work program and budget to add funding to the US 101 Corridor Transportation Management for work element 3872 to reflect support services for the continued operation of the Carpinteria Creek shuttle and to provide for van pool incentives. 4E3, approve and authorize the Executive Director, Margie Kern, to execute the amendments to the OWP and budget.
And do we need Mr. Epperson to make a report, or we just go ahead and get a motion and vote?
It's up to you as a board. If you'd like, I can make the presentation.
Okay. A quick summary.
Sure. The Carpinteria Creek shuttle has been operating for a few months now with the fires and the floods and some of the delay of the work that's been done. We originally brought an amendment to you in your January meeting and approved that, but the extent of the delay was longer than we thought. Early in January, we weren't sure what was what, and we probably should have anticipated it being a little longer than, Murphy's Law, it's always longer than you think. So here we are back again asking for another amendment. So I apologize for our oversight in not thinking ahead, but here we are, and we're asking for your approval.
So, seeing no lights, may I have a motion for...
I move to approve item E.
Thank you. And Mr.
I'll move to approve.
Okay.
Staff recommendation.
All right, so we have a motion in 2 seconds. I'll interpret it that way. And would you call the vote, please, Ms. Contreras?
Directors Wolf? Aye. Adam? Aye. Lavanino?
Aye.
Richardson?
Aye.
Lizaldi?
Aye.
Mosby?
Aye.
Bennett?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Sierra? Aye. And Chair Hartman?
Aye.
Motion passes 12-0.
Okay, and I think then we're ready for a motion on the balance of the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
And once again, would you call the vote on that, Ms. Contreras?
Sure. Directors Williams?
Aye.
Wolf?
Aye.
Adam?
Aye.
Lavanino?
Aye.
Richardson? Lizaldi?
Aye.
Mosby?
Aye.
Bennett?
Aye.
Clark?
Aye.
Murillo?
Aye.
Patino?
Aye.
Sierra? And Chair Hartman.
Aye.
Motion passes 13-0.
Thank you. I gather that Helene Schneider is not here today, so we're going to take item 5 sometime in the future at a time convenient to her. So that means we're moving on to item 6 in our agenda, and would you read that into the record, Ms. Contreras?
Certainly. Item 6, 2018 Transit Needs Assessment. Recommended action. Receive a presentation on the 2018 Transit Needs Assessment process and draft findings. Provide input to staff.
Good morning, Chair and Directors. I'm Mike Becker of staff. Today I will discuss the 2018 Unmet Transit Needs process, seek your input on the draft findings. No action is necessary today. As you're likely aware, SBCAG conducts this Unmet Transit Needs process annually to determine if there are any unmet transit needs identified by the community that are reasonable to meet. This is applicable if any TDA recipient proposes to use the TDA funding for purposes other than transit services. The amount of funding being diverted to other uses has decreased over time, and this year no recipients intend to use TDA funding for any other purpose other than providing transit service. To gather input on potential unmet transit needs, we have historically conducted a hearing during the board's January meeting. Due to disappointing attendance over the last few years, we sought to revisit the public process for this cycle. Instead of one hearing, we conducted 3 hearings, and all were conducted in the evening to allow or enable broader participation. We had hearings in Santa Maria, Lompoc, and Santa Barbara. An interpreter was available at each hearing. Unfortunately, with the exception of Santa Maria, the attendance continued to disappoint. We also have a minimum month-long comment period where people can submit comments via mail, email, or telephone. We brought an item to you in September 2017 to highlight our outreach approach for this cycle and to seek your approval. Despite the poor attendance at the hearings, save Santa Maria, we still received numerous comments. In this process, a comment needs to identify an actual unmet transit need to be analyzed for reasonableness to meet. Adjusting schedules or noting that buses are dirty are not considered unmet transit needs, for example. Several of the comments we received identified perceived unmet transit needs that are actually being met. For instance, a commenter requested service between Orcutt and San Luis Obispo, and this is already being met by the slow RTA Route 10. In this cycle, we analyzed a single request for new service. This was midday service on the Clean Air Express. This was found not reasonable to meet due to the expense of running the over-the-road coaches and the expected level of ridership, which is low. As always, it's important to note that there are a variety of examples where we receive requests for new services. They were found not reasonable to meet through this process, and we were able to meet them through other means. Santa Maria's services and the Clean Air Express will both be going through short-range transit planning processes in the near future. This provides an excellent opportunity to look at improvements that might not be subject to this process or of a more systematic nature. We changed the hearing process this year, and it did not bring the success that we had hoped for. We'll revisit the process again next year. We also intend to have reconsideration of the unmet transit needs definition and reasonable to meet criteria in advance of the next cycle. Our draft finding is there are no unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet. Today's item is only for review and comment, and no action is necessary. We'll return next month seeking your approval.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Do any directors have any questions, comments to make? Do we have any? Mr. Williams.
When in the process do any of the jurisdictions actually state whether they are going to propose to use transit TDA funds for non-transit uses?
We reach out to each jurisdiction, I believe it's in about December of each year, asking them what their intentions are for the upcoming fiscal year.
And I mean, what I have been told by our Public Works Director is that county staff is not going to propose using any TDA funds for non-transit uses in this budget cycle, and I think we were the last scofflaw. That's hopefully ends a very painful, contentious chapter in California, in Santa Barbara County history. This yearly process but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't examine some of the unmet transit needs in the county.
Okay, seeing no others, thank you, Mr. Becker.
Thank you, Chair.
Turning then to, any public comment on this item?
We have no public comment.
Okay, so then finishing with 6 and turning to 7 one-minute reports. Does any director have a 1-minute report to share with us? I do. Okay, Mr. Mosby and Ms.
I just wanted to shout out to Caltrans on an encroachment permit that a lot of people say takes forever to get done, and I had a developer who was looking at 5 to 6 months, they were told, and it happened in less than 30 days. So, you know, we got a Starbucks open thanks to you guys, another one. But anyhow, thank you guys, and they did a good job.
Accolades across the board. Ms. Patino.
Thank you, Chair Hartman. I just wanted to let you know that the City of Santa Maria did receive a $300,000 grant from Caltrans for a streetscape plan in downtown Santa Maria. And so the primary goal of the plan is to turn the Main Street and Broadway within the downtown into a more usable primary corridor for pedestrians and bicyclists. Our City Council did have a goal-setting meeting last week, which we do annually. Yesterday at that North County Subregional, we talked about and we received a report on the Clean Air Express transition update. But I wanted to say and give accolades to Austin Odell, who is our transit manager, because he found 17 buses in the valley, and he's so connected to transit people, but for the cost of these 17 coaches is $732,000, which is a far less than the $6.7 million it would have cost us. This is going above and beyond the call of duty. This is one of our employees in Santa Maria, so I wanted to give a shout out to Austin. Thank you.
From all of us, thank you.
Wait, I have one more I need to tell you about. Santa Maria is the first city in the Santa Barbara County to have its own gigabit service. And later this year, with the Wave broadband, we'll be using our own city-owned fiber optic loop. And I'm not sure if we're the only city in 2 counties, but certainly in Santa Barbara County. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm envious. Seeing no more lights, Mr. Clark, Mr. Lizaldi, did either of you have anything? All right. Turning to our Executive Director's report.
Madam Chairperson, members of the board, I just want to give a shout out to Director Patino for spending the day with me and Sarkis in Sacramento, advocating on our behalf with our state representatives. We were joined by our Central Coast Coalition. It was a long day. Let's just leave it at that. Her plane got canceled at the last minute, so we had a long travel back to Santa Barbara, but we made it safe and sound. It was also on February 1st, that same week, I got the pleasure of traveling to Sacramento again to participate in our CTC STIP hearings, State Transportation Improvement Program hearings in Sacramento, to advocate for the 101 and our local project in Goleta. We also supported the Interregional Improvement Program request from the state to support this project as well. So things are moving in the right direction, and funding hopefully will come true here. And then we also submitted our various grant applications for the 101 corridor on January 30th. We submitted applications for $16 million in the local partnership program and the freight program. Our freight program application was the only application submitted from the Central Coast, because we received the unanimous support of the Central Coast Coalition partners on our submittal. So that was a joint effort that we were the #1 priority for the freight program, and that was well received at the state level. And tomorrow will be our final grant application submitted this cycle, and that one is for $168 million for the Solutions for Congested Corridors program. We are a high priority in the state, as evidenced by the Caltrans submitting the application on our behalf. We will hear back from the CTC staff in late April with a recommendation on all 3 programs. Our hard work with Caltrans District 5 the past few months really paid off. We feel confident about our application and our partnership on the application. And by providing our local match through Measure A, our projects hopefully will get ready to go sooner than the other regions in the state. So I think we're very competitive, and thank you to this board for making Measure A happen, and now we're reaping the fruits of your labor. Again, I want to repeat Alice's shout out to Austin on the buses. That will be an action item on your next agenda. I'm hoping that we'll have an agreement with to transfer those buses, those 17 buses, 17 for the price of 1. You can't beat that deal, Peter Adam, right? So again, it's going to be a game changer for our Clean Air Express and possibly other services. So I'm looking forward to that opportunity as we move forward, but I'm hoping to get your support on that transfer at your next meeting. So thank you.
Sounds like they found a lower bidder. I like it.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments in response to our executive director's report? Any public comment slips?
No public comment.
Okay. Then turning to Caltrans.
Do that. Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm Scott Eads, here representing Tim Gubbins as the district director today. And I have a few things to report, and then I have a presentation that I wanted to share with you, which I will do in a second. So first, I also wanted to acknowledge the effort that it took to pull together the transportation, the trade corridors program funding application, as well as the congested corridors program application, and there were others as well. SBCAG staff did a terrific job of really providing leadership in that effort. There was a lot of folks involved at Caltrans as well as SBCAG. I think that we are going to be in very good standing. We're well positioned. The quality of the application and the feedback we received from headquarters, I think we're in a really good place. And I'm very hopeful. Don't know exactly how much funds we will receive, but I'm feeling very hopeful that we're well positioned for both of those programs. Also wanted to note just a few things within Caltrans world. We have a public participation plan that's being updated, that's out for review. Just basically incorporates additional information on transportation decision making within Caltrans. It's updated every 3 to 5 years. Comments are due on Friday, March 9th. That's something that's available online. There's also a call for projects that your staff is well aware of. There's 3 transportation planning grants for sustainable transportation planning. There's sustainable communities, which is one grant category. Another is strategic partnerships. And then there's adaptation planning. We've already discussed some of those that your staff is working on now. Those are again due on Friday, February 23rd. Also just wanted to note that this grant cycle is happening fairly quickly for the next round, and that we anticipate the next round of the same grants, another call for projects, and with applications due in October 2018. So just so you know, start thinking ahead about that one. And then finally, we have the 2019 ATP, or Active Transportation Program, Cycle 4 applications, which are, that cycle is coming around again. We're looking at the CTC adopting the guidelines and the fund estimate late March 22nd. And then a call for projects is scheduled just a few days later on March 26th, with applications due on June 8th. Okay, well, looks like we have dueling numbers here, so June or July for when the applications are due. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight before I move on to the presentation is that there have been some scenic highway signs installed on 101 for the Gaviota Coast. From what I understand, there's one northbound at Winchester Canyon on 101, and then a southbound one near the Gaviota rest stop. So it's nice to see the signs going in for that recent designation.
And Mr. Williams, do you have your light on for a question?
I do, and I may have to duck out because the SBCAG is about, Board of Directors is about to take up the SB1 questions again, and I'm the county's rep at SBCAG, so I have to attend that meeting as well at the same time, so I'll be running back and forth. But before I talk about the bad, I just want to talk about the good, which is that your folks did yeoman's work on this disaster, and we really, really appreciate it, and I hope the public really recognizes that. We're definitely having a host of hiccups about, and public, maybe public distrust about the 192 bridges, and I know some of those have safety reports, and some of them have, I think, even 95% design work already done. But I haven't seen that, and the public definitely hasn't seen it, and it would be really good, particularly so that the public has faith in the fact that we're not just closing those bridges because, like, we feel like it, but because it's an actual safety risk, that we release that information. And that we show the public the design work, so that, you know, maybe the public has some ideas on making that 95% design work better for the community, so we don't have an appeal of the CDP, and, you know, that we can try to work with surrounding residents. And so that would just be my appeal, so that this doesn't take 2 years and hopefully only takes 12 months or less.
Would you like me to respond to that? Okay, Madam Chair.
Insofar that you can. I understand that you might not be able to.
Let me just touch on it briefly. I was planning on touching on it in the presentation, but this is an important thing to talk about. So first of all, the context has changed out there dramatically from when we were in project development efforts. I believe the bridge structure you're specifically just talking about is Arroyo Prieta on 192. Yes, we had advanced in the design. We had coordinated with the county, had been before the Planning Commission on that more than once, and received feedback. So first of all, the feedback that we received previously, the team is taking that into account. In addition, the context of the project has changed. Not only does it look dramatically different on the ground, but also the structure was impacted further. We have bridge rails that were temporary bridge rails with some barriers that were filled. They're actually water-filled barriers, but we couldn't put water in them before because of the fact that this bridge structure couldn't handle traffic, couldn't handle the weight of traffic and the loaded barriers at the same time. Since then, those barriers were holding, or the old barriers, in addition to the water-filled or the barriers that would have been filled with water, provided a safety feature to allow traffic to pass. Since then, with the event, the rails were removed completely on one side to debris and rocks. So those barriers no longer hold, and we can't fasten those to the bridge deck. And so the reason the bridge is now closed is for a traffic safety reason. We've always had a need to replace the structure, at least in recent years, for structural deficiencies. All that said, I want you to be assured that the design team is looking at it. Yes, we had 95% plans, although under the emergency contract, the scope of the work is likely to be different. We're looking to scale down the project to the best degree we can while still taking traffic safety into account. On all the locations, we do not have a firm schedule yet. We're working to develop that. Some key factors that play into developing a schedule in these locations have to do with the fact that we have high pressure gas lines on many locations that are adjacent to or on the structure that we're dependent on utilities to be able to move those. Those are challenging utilities to move and expensive, and so that coordination is already beginning, but that will be a factor in the schedule. The footing type, there's boulders that exist. The soil type here is challenging with the size of the boulders and the soil conditions that we have there. So that'll play into the design and the footing type itself. We are looking at an advanced bridge construction method, which is ABC, we call it ABC, and that's basically where the construction of the footings can occur concurrently with construction of slabs at a remote location, and then the slabs or the bridge deck is brought in separately. So that's a way to advance our timelines here. We also have some unique access issues at the Toro Creek and Toro Canyon structures, in that there's some folks that need to use one or the other structure in order to access their properties, and so we're going to be giving thought to work that's being done on those structures independently to maintain access to those residents. Obviously, removal of the bridges and when we're able to do that is an important factor. We're going to be those bridges are now open for emergency vehicles. We have daisy chain locked with emergency vehicles having access to individual locks. And so we don't want to take those structures down until we're ready for construction. So we're going to be watching that closely and coordinating with emergency responders on that. And then two final factors, and that is weather obviously will play a role in terms of what we can do. We don't know what the rest of this winter and spring looks like. And coordination with resource agencies. We do recognize that at the Arroyo Prieta, we have the county planning has permitting jurisdiction for the coastal permitting process, so we'll be coordinating with them. And notifications did go out right after the event, and we certainly intend to, as we have details to share. Right now, we're gathering information and doing assessments. We do not have designs for this emergency situation, but we're working very quickly to try to do that.
So let me just make sure that I understood that the 95% design was from a design previous to the emergency that you may or may not be able to use now that conditions have changed.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're ready for your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So the presentation that I'm going to provide you is about the event, the 1-9 event, and it's focused primarily on the 101, but also touch on 192. It's a series of photographs that were taken throughout the cleanup effort, and I just wanted to basically go through and explain what that looked like and what we're able to achieve in a very short period of time. So as all of you know, an extreme rain event occurred after the Thomas Fire on January 9th. It resulted in the mud flows that occurred, resulted in immediate closure of 101. It inundated the many areas of 101. The most dramatic was here at Olive Mill in terms of the amount of material that ended up right down on 101. It became a lake of sorts. The event was totally unprecedented, and of course, it resulted in the loss of life and destruction of homes. So I'm focusing on the 101, but it's one very small part of a larger challenge that this community is dealing with right now. As you know, 101 and I-5 in the central coast of California, or the central part of California, are the primary routes to carry not only the local traffic that needs access for these communities along the coastline, but also interregional traffic. So having 101 closed had huge repercussions. Out of direction travel to travel between LA and Goleta, for instance, were about 4.5 to 5 hours of out of direction travel. And so there were many folks that were stuck in that situation, as well as communities of Summerlin and Carpinteria and others that were totally isolated because of the closure. I'm going to move on to some slides here. So this is 101, looking from the Olive Mill overcrossing, looking west. You can see the amount of debris and water in this area. This is looking in the other direction. Just the sheer amount of material that came down was, you know, and the fact that it wasn't just water or mud, it was trees and yard furniture and just an incredible amount of stuff. Vehicles. It became a river of mud and debris and water. It was 12 feet deep at the most severe location. Here you can see the mobilization effort. I have a short video here. We'll see if I can make this work. Come on. Okay, I'll move on. So a major challenge was dewatering the area. Disposal was a huge issue. There was so much water and debris. It was totally saturated at first. The pumps that we were trying to use to pull the water out kept getting plugged. Ultimately, we discovered that vacuum trucks, which is what you see here, did the best job. At one point, we were using chain link fence to try to manage the debris and separate that from the water material. There were 24/7 operations. Caltrans worked in 12-hour shifts, 24 hours a day.
May I interrupt for a question from Mr. Adam?
Well, that's more of a comment. I just want to thank the oil industry for being still remaining here to the degree that they are, because that's who I recognize, some of those trucks, and that's what they do all the rest of the time, is service the oil industry. And had we completely gotten oil out, as a lot of people would like to do, those vehicles wouldn't have been on site and being able to show up at a moment's notice. So
just wanted to also note that at first the material would self-level. So that was what was incredible about this event for anybody that was there and saw it after the fact, of course, is you know, you expect that a water event, a flood event, everything ends up at the lowest location. In this case, it was like a concrete slurry, and so it was on our side slopes, 2 or 3 feet deep, and different viscosities, and you know, some of that had to dry out for us to be able to even pick it up with a bucket at times, and then that created challenges also for the trucks heading north to be able to dispose of that material as you're driving, to have that sloshing around. So there were a lot of challenges just associated with the material itself. We found that loaders with skeleton buckets helped because we could sort the debris out from the water material. There were also, as you know, search and rescue efforts that were ongoing. Spotters were required for each excavator and loader. Challenging conditions, certainly. There were hundreds of personnel and equipment. Construction forces and Caltrans maintenance forces were working side by side. There were about 350 personnel That included Caltrans staff, Granite Construction, who was our partner on this. They were the emergency contractor, and their subcontractors working together. We utilized 40 pieces of equipment, hundreds of trucks. There were 210 trucks working in 124-hour shifts, and that was typical throughout the entire duration. In total, we had 13,000 truckloads of material, round trips, taken out of the 101 corridor during this time period. Disposal was a huge issue. We worked with stakeholders to identify 5 disposal sites for the material. Some of those were down in District 7 in Ventura County. Also Fairview at Goleta, Cathedral Oaks, up in Buellton at the Granite Asphalt Plant, and then also north of Winchester Canyon. In about 12 days, we were able to move 105,000 cubic yards of material and debris. And then once the highway was cleared of the debris and material, then the highway was replaced and restriped. Was repaved in some sections and restriped. We also had crews that needed to remove the guardrail, so we brought in crews, again, some from Caltrans, some from Granite, that we had multiple guardrail crews working simultaneously, removing the rail and then having the excavators pull the material out. The medians, between the median barriers was just completely inundated with mud to the top of the barriers and debris, of course. So those crews worked to pull the rails off and then replace them after we were able to remove the debris from the center. That applied on the side slopes as well and any exterior barriers. Just want to note here you can see the line on the structure where the mud and debris was just days before. So one-on-one by the numbers. Again, I'll just recap some of these numbers I've already mentioned. 105,000 cubic yards of material removed, 350 staff, 400 pieces of equipment, 1,500 trucks, 13,000 truckloads of material, 45,000 combined hours worked. We responded to 9 locations over 11 miles. We worked at 8 creek crossings, and it was a total estimated cost of $11.25 million for the 12-day operation. There was also some acknowledgement. We appreciated the tweet from Oprah. That's not something we receive every day. And we also appreciate just the feedback from the community. There was some signs posted you'll see later, which was unique for us. So also I want to just highlight the fact of what was happening on 192. Here you see a picture, some of the closures when the Thomas Fire was occurring. The path of destruction was just completely overwhelming. Again, if you've had the chance to see any of this with your own eyes, the pictures just do not do it justice, and it's just absolutely tragic what happened up there. So 192 sustained severe damage. The recovery effort is ongoing, as you know. Creek beds and culverts were filled with large boulders and debris, and several bridges were damaged. The Toro Canyon Bridge had large rocks. Here's an example, Toro Canyon Bridge. This rock was not there before this event happened. We had multiple situations like this where we needed to clear the bridges for the next rain event, and doing so was no small challenge because we had rocks wedged underneath as well as trees and debris that overflowed the structures. Again, this is one of the locations, San Ysidro Creek. These rocks, even though they look like they're naturally under the structure, did not exist there before. Just removing rocks of this size and scale is an immense challenge. This is a long 192. We had to bring in crews to try to break up the rock so we could use equipment to even get them onto the trucks and move them. You can see some bridge material that's washed down here. That's not from our structures, that's from structures upstream. And you can see, again, the immensity of and velocity of the vent to be able to carry this kind of material down. So here's where we are with 192 after the structures assessments were completed. We have 4 bridges which are now under closure for public traffic. That's Montecito Creek, Romero Creek, Toro Canyon Creek and Arroyo Prieto. All of these need to be replaced, and we're working under an emergency contract to do that. Again, Arroyo Prieto is in the coastal zone, so we'll be working with the county on all of these, but that one we also need a coastal development permit or work with the county to achieve emergency status for a coastal development permit. We also have 2 bridges where the rails were removed or damaged, and that's at San Ysidro Creek Bridge and Toro Creek Bridge. Those were, again, those efforts will be to replace those. And this is just a depiction of where those 6 creek crossings are on 192. And the red ones are, the red stars are the locations where we will be replacing the structures. The 2 yellows are the ones where we're replacing the bridge rails only. This again is that sign we saw. So I also want to highlight the fact that there were other things leading up to this. Caltrans crews were working in 12-hour shifts day and night since December 6th. Manning checkpoints and mandatory closures for 150, 192, and other side of 150, on either side of 154, with the Thomas Fire under intense and hazardous conditions. On December 15th, we responded to a tanker spill, which required us to, and this was at the time when there was mandatory closures and evacuations occurring. And so we repaired 101 in the spill condition within 24 hours. And then, of course, we responded to the mudslide on January 9th. So I just, as a closing note here, I just want to highlight the fact that there were multiple people and agencies involved throughout this whole process. Extraordinary amount of coordination with resource agencies, County of Santa Barbara, City of Carpinteria, County Flood Control, Office of Emergency Services, CHP, local emergency responders. This was really a team effort, and it was, and also Granite Construction, who was, again, our emergency contractor here. Just really appreciate the coordination and cooperation. It was really impressive. I was at the EOC the day after, and to see all that was happening there and all the folks that were involved in trying to manage all aspects of this event was really outstanding. Again, we appreciate the efforts, and it's good to have 101 open again, and we'll certainly be touching base with SBCAG and the local jurisdictions on 192 as those efforts continue as well.
Any questions or comments? I think that just has to rank among the top human achievements to manage all of that. I'm just curious, how I was impressed by your work at Big Sur, and how would you compare the two?
So that was a different situation in that, well, going back to the factors that I had listed earlier in terms of what's involved to replace these structures, that structure was much larger. And that one had no access. It was completely cut off. The community of Big Sur was completely cut off. And it was an extraordinary design effort and coordination effort to achieve what we did. We were able to replace the bridge and have it operating again in 8 months. In that situation, we did not have the utility issues we have here with the high power transmission lines and the 24-inch gas line. So those utility issues are going to certainly be a driver for the schedule, and we're certainly looking forward to any kind of cooperation we can achieve with the utility companies. But yeah, we have the same level of motivation here. We're doing everything we can to move this along as quickly as we can. We're really interested in getting those bridges open and trying to make sure that they're in keeping with the community at the same time.
Thank you. Director Lavanino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was wondering if it would be possible if you could email that to Terry and then she could distribute it, because I think we would all like to use this at some point in our districts.
Certainly.
Director Wolf.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know you've heard this a million times, but I have to also say that the amount of work and coordination that Caltrans did with all of the other agencies and your workers and private contractors was just exceptional, and I just want to express my sincere appreciation. I had some contact with some of your staff along the way, and everyone was so responsive. I was at the EOC, and one of the gentlemen who was in one of those pictures was there and updated everyone all along the way. I just want during your presentation, I touched base with our Assistant CEO, Matt Pontes, to ask him if you folks, SBCAG and Caltrans, are part of our weekly kind of legislative phone calls. And he was going to make sure that you folks are invited, because I think having your, if people have questions, and these are folks from DC to Sacramento and locally. So just having you on the line might also assist in some of these 192 questions, traffic management. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that that information will be coming, so you're part of those meetings.
Okay, we'd be happy to participate.
And thank you very much.
Okay, seeing no more lights, and just checking in with Mr. Lizaldi.
No, we're good.
All right, thank you. So any public comment on this?
No public comment.
Okay, turning to item 10, committee meetings. In January, I attended my first meeting of the Coastal Rail Coordination Council, and the goal, that's an advocacy group that's trying to bring rail service back to LA and San Jose, between those two destinations. And I guess there was a Coast Daylight service in 1972 that was stopped, and now we're trying to bring this back. And so the group is seeking to develop a formal MOU as a means of increasing visibility and increasing sort of the heft and recognition of this partnership, and hoping that that will also allow for increased funding opportunities in the future. So Scott isn't here. He was there with me, but so nothing to add. So I guess we're turning to the second, the Pacific Surfliner Board meeting. Mr. Bennett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This wasn't my first meeting, but it was my first meeting as being the regular member of the Lausanne Board of Directors. And that occurred on the 29th of January in the city of Orange. And probably the biggest item on the agenda that we spent time on had to deal with the Pacific Surfliner peak period service to our county out of passing through Ventura County. And so we approved and directed staff to continue the efforts to implement the peak period service. And we directed staff to initiate negotiations with us in regards to do the cost sharing and marketing related to the peak period service between Los Angeles and Santa Barbara County. So we're working hand in hand in that regard and moving forward. We have gotten approvals for the Union Pacific Railroad, which is typically a challenge, and in this case, they're all signed off. We're still awaiting the cost estimates for Union Station, and we're hopeful that by this Friday we will have those cost estimates as to what they actually are. We believe them to be in the range of about $2.5 million for the 2-year pilot program, but we need to get that pinned down as to the actual dollars and cents. And the Lausanne Executive Directors continuing to work on the additional train set. We can implement the retime service without it, but ultimately we need an additional train set to be able to move forward, both for maintenance items and for additional service. So that's kind of important. And we have $15 million from the state of California to go forward with that particular effort. And we're looking at used refurbished train sets in the state of Michigan. And so refurbed, exactly. So it's pretty exciting. Did I use the wrong word there? No. But in any case, these aren't brand new, but they do serve the purpose. They are double deck. And one of the things that's different about our particular Surfliner compared to the Capitol Corridor and the San Joaquin, we really truly need double deck cars that with the 6 train set that holds 500 people, because we process so many people, and the estimates I've been told different numbers, but I'll stick with the 7 million as being an accurate number. We're the second busiest corridor in the United States, which is pretty mind-boggling. I don't know that most people know that, so it kind of bespeaks as to the success of the Surfliner. And we are one of the transit services that continues to increase, as opposed to, I know others have unfortunately fallen off somewhat. Well, the Pacific Surfliner continues to increase its ridership and its desirability. And I might further add that, and we spoke to this, I had a chance to speak to this during the meeting, that the train service, the disaster occurred early in the morning on the 9th of January. By late morning of the 11th, we were actually running the first train on the tracks. And kudos go out to, again, Union Pacific Railroad, because they're the ones that are responsible for the track and being able to open it up. And they had, we were kind of blessed, as many of us might know, they've been doing maintenance work on the rail line. So they actually had maintenance crews here locally, and so they were able to immediately dispatch those crews down to the affected area, and they brought in some additional crews with additional expertise to work on the disaster. So it was pretty exciting as it all turned out that we were able to do that. And then we got the additional cars in on Friday night, additional locomotives, which expanded the ridership capabilities, and that Saturday morning that was implemented. And I have to say it was a pretty awesome experience. I rode on the train myself because I was flying out of Burbank, so I had no way really to get there other than the long way. Really didn't want to do that. So I rode the train with great success and made my connections, and it turned out to be a very pleasurable experience, I might add. So kudos go off to our staff who worked heavily during this time, to Jennifer Bergen's staff at the LoSAN, and certainly all of the cooperators that we needed cooperation from to be able to make this whole thing work. It was pretty awesome, everybody working so closely together. So I thought that was pretty awesome. So in any case, we've adopted our new business plan for the coming year, and we're going forward with that. I had it singled out here, but I didn't tab it, so let's see if I can find it easily. If I can't, then I'll just, here it is. We're expanding the awareness of the Los Angeles, San Diego, San Luis Obispo rail corridor and the Surfliner. We're enhancing the passenger experience. We've been upgraded the food service and the drinking service so that you have better choices, and that's kind of neat. We're ensuring the fiscal sustainability of the Pacific Surfliner. We've got great revenue coming in based on that ridership. We're doing a better job on integrating with all of the bus services and all the cooperators that provide ridership to the Surfliner, and we move people in that regard with a much better degree than ever before. And we're moving the expansion of the Pacific Surfliner service along the rail corridor from San Luis Obispo to San Diego. So we'll be adding another train set going forward. So that pretty much concludes, although I have one last document that was presented to us, just giving us kind of an overall increased daily ridership during the disaster. And we actually started it on the 11th, and I don't have those figures, but beginning on Monday, January 15th, we had 4,557 riders that were riding the Surfliner. And that was between Ventura and Guadalupe, Santa Maria. And that continued on Tuesday. There was a big drop off down to 1810. Then on Wednesday, it went back up again to 4422. And then Thursday, it dropped down again to 2535. And what this was beginning to tell us is we were thinking people were staying overnight once they got here, as opposed to going back and using it. So we're thinking that's probably what caused that up and down ridership level, that people decided once they got here they were going to stay a few days before they turned around and went back. And then Friday the 19th, we were at 3994. And then Saturday the 20th, we were back up again, and we added, that's when the additional cars went into effect. We were back at a greater number than before, and that's 5,335 folks. And then on Sunday, 4,923. Then on Monday, January 22nd, 2,025. And that was the morning that the freeway actually reopened. So I actually did on Sunday, but the commuter traffic then came on the freeway on that Monday, the 22nd. But the ridership was still 2,025. So it was incredibly awesome. It shows what the potential for the train is, and that I spoke to so many people, both at the station level in Santa Barbara and at Goleta, and then on the train myself. And we're so appreciative and happy that they had this alternative and they made it work. And they were very optimistic and hopeful that we would be continuing to improve the service and the times that the service is provided. So it was great feedback, great opportunity for this community to learn what the possibilities really are. That concludes my report.
Thank you.
The Calvans report didn't make the agenda, so you'll be disappointed that I won't be talking about the greenhouse calculation by the county. That the ridership in Imperial County exceeds the prior year, and that we approved an RFP request to buy 200 more 15-passenger vans, with $6 million of the dollars coming from the San Joaquin Valley, a federal grant to the San Joaquin Valley. And I think that that's probably enough that you didn't want to hear about.
We won't make that mistake again. Thank you. Any public comment on this? Okay. No. Moving on to 11, communications. Is there some?
No, only if there's any questions on the communications, would we answer them?
All right. Supervisor, Ms. Wolf, is that your light on down there, or Mr. Mosby, or? Okay. Okay, I think then we've concluded our regular agenda, and we're about to adjourn to closed session. Ms. Van Mollem, would you explain what we're about to do?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're scheduled for 2 items for closed session. First is conference with labor negotiators under Government Code Section 54957.6 for the Executive Director. And the second item is public employee appointment, reappointment, Government Code Section 54957, and that's for the Executive Director position as well.
Thank you, and we hope to be back before lunch. Okay, we're reconvened, but we need to wait for our county or for our SBCAG council.
Trusty. Her bag of tricks. I feel like we were taking time.
Okay, we're reconvening the SBCAG board meeting of February 15th, and Ms. Van Mollem, would you report out our closed session actions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The board met in closed session on 2 items for labor negotiations and for reappointment, and the board voted unanimously to reappoint Margie Kern as the Executive Director for SBCAG.
Thank you. And with that, we are adjourned to, when is our next meeting? Sorry, I should have that here. But
next meeting is March 15th in Santa Maria.
Thank you very much.
Beginning at 10 o'clock.